So, as Andrew mentioned, before Stormy Daniels ever took the stand, we heard from Trump today, actually, in his own words. Prosecutors called Sally Franklin to the stand. She's a publisher from Penguin Random House to enter into evidence books written by the ex-president. Yes, he wrote books. Those excerpts revealed Trump as a micromanager and a very proud one at that. Quote, always look at the numbers yourself. If things turn grim, you're the one left holding the checkbook. No detail is too small to consider. I even try to sign as many checks as possible. For me, there's nothing worse than a computer signing checks, end quote. And in a chapter of one of the books called How to Pinch Pennies, this is real, they added into the record that Trump, quote, wrote, quote, as I said before, I always sign my checks so I know where my money is going. I also always read my bills so I know what I'm being charged. We're back at the table and with Vaughn Hilliard. So we were talking in the break. We sometimes have our best conversations in the break. Not really. We save it all for the show. But about how there's also an element of just how badly they did this. I mean, these weren't good criminals. These were, Michael Cohen tells David Pecker, go to the App Store and download Signal so we won't get, they were bad at the criminal element of the hush money scheme.
The defense has to argue the following. When Donald Trump is signing those checks month after month, and there's the invoice there that he did not look at the invoice, and he just signed the checks without caring at all.
For the first time.
Yeah, exactly. Just was gone ahead and paying for what legal fees that were not legal fees and paying twice as much than he should have been paying, even though, by the way, he has said he paid for reimbursements, so he wouldn't be, that doesn't make any sense. And what possible motive would Alan have or Michael have to lie to him? In other words, they would be fired for that. What would be the reason? He is now the president of the United States. There would be zero reason. And we know that, in fact, Donald Trump learns of if you didn't know at the time, we know he learned from Hope Hicks that he knew after the fact, and he did not have a reaction of, I cannot believe you did this. So, that is sort of a mini version of what you are going to hear in summation. And there's no way, if you just think about if you were trying to sort of pull the wool over Donald Trump's eyes and you had this whole scheme, remember, to pull it off, you have to count on the fact that Donald Trump will not ask any questions about those checks.
Donald Trump picks his own playlist at his rallies. Donald Trump wants to leave NATO because they don't, quote, pay their bills. I don't think there's a lot of evidence that he reads much, but political polls he reads, and the bills, we know, not from me, from him. He reads all of them, signs all of his own expenses.
And you got that from the testimony from both Jeff McConney and Deborah Tarasoff. Deborah Tarasoff was in accounts payable. She says he didn't just blindly sign checks. There were checks that got sent back where he had a question and he would void them. He was the ultimate person who would approve any expense. And if it was over $10,000, it had to be approved either by him or his sons. If it was from his account, he's the only person who could sign them. And then you have Jeff McConney giving examples of the fact that, he had earlier in his career, there was an exchange where he said, you're fired, Jeff. And then he says, no, you're not fired, but you actually have to negotiate my bills. Don't just pay them, always negotiate them down. Again, all of this is consistent with what we heard today from those books of the fact that you're pinching pennies. You have to be the one who knows your finances. Don't delegate that to other people. Make sure that you are the one who knows what is going on. And so it really painted a vivid picture in his own words. And then the defense cross was, well, there's a ghostwriter. You can't attribute that to Trump. But the ghostwriter was one of his executive assistants who said, I'm there and basically was the eyes and ears. I was in the office right outside of his, like a desk right outside his office. I recounted things that I saw and heard, like that was part of, what had come out during the cross. And so, again, this idea he has no idea what was in the book. Well, it was somebody very close to him who, if she was adding things, he would have been aware. And again, a lot of it was personal anecdotes of his, conversations he had with his father learning about finance, conversations he had with people he worked with that only he would have been privy to. So, the cross really was not able to say that these words could not be attributed to Donald Trump. They were quite plainly attributed to Donald Trump.
He also really enjoyed when they put the covers of those books up.
Yes.
I watched as he was talking to counsel and just being like, oh, that was a good one. I remember that one. That was a bestseller.
Don't I look thin?
Yeah.
You could just imagine him. Oh, put that back up. I mean, the other thing that is interesting to me is there was so much concern that Stormy Daniels would describe the sexual act and his body parts below the belt. There's no concern about Stormy Daniels' testimony about what happened after the Access Hollywood tape came out. He's in trouble criminally because of the campaign. Nobody cares about her description of his body parts.
No, and I think that, again, get back to that timeline. Why was this story so important to be brought off the market? Why was there such activity going on? It was because of the Access Hollywood tape. It was because that tape comes down, the campaign is scurrying about, they need to get this story off the market. David Pecker's too tight. We talk about, the gang that can't shoot straight in this cover-up. If David Pecker doesn't have the money, doesn't want to, be the bank, and therefore, it's up to Michael Cohen to do it. And here we are with the falsification of those records, which, again, the paper trail here is extraordinary. If you're going to do crimes, don't do them all in text. Dylan Howard frantically messaging Keith Davids and Gina Rodriguez. You've got an extraordinary amount of evidence. Don't worry about what's going on the stand. Just look at it. Look at the evidence that's entered in. It's absolutely fascinating.